Liam sat back and listened to the waves. He could hear the soft call of the seagulls in the distance. The wind tousled his hair a bit and whipped at the ends of his shorts. He opened his eyes and looked out over the waves. The sun was glistening off their turquoise crests. A hand reached out from behind him and clasped his. Soft lips tickled his ear. "She can't love you like I can, Liam." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and replied, "She can't know about this, Uma." She moved closer and put her head on his chest. Her sandy blonde hair swirled around him as they breathed together. She looked up at him. "Your wife will be home in 5 minutes." He jumped up from the sand, almost knocking over their umbrella. "Shit, all right, I gotta go. Thanks for everything. I'll see you again soon." "When?" "I don't know. Soon." She looked up at him, and they kissed. Liam touched the side of his head and said, "End trip." Uma and the beach around them froze and then flashed as a grid of green lines sprawled over a black void. Liam's office took shape again, and a small sphere on his desk glowed with a soft turquoise. He ran upstairs and changed out of his pajamas. The front door downstairs slid closed, and Liam could hear his wife hang her coat on the rack. Liam was slipping on his shoes as she yelled, "I'm home, sweets." She walked to the bathroom and closed the door. Liam went downstairs. She finished and walked to the kitchen, where Liam was now pouring a glass of orange juice. "Are you excited for tonight?" She knew Liam well and knew that his confused expression meant he didn't remember about tonight. "Sheesh, that new Thai spot, remember? We were going to go check it out tonight." Liam took a sip of orange juice and wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt. "Right, Thai. No, yeah, I remember." She rolled her eyes in a playful way and said, "All your projects push the real-life stuff out sometimes. It's like filling a glass with too much fluid and nothing else can fit in there." Liam took another sip of his juice. "I've just been working really hard on this project, and it's been taking a lot of my mental energy." Phoebe leaned in and slipped an arm around his waist. "Hopefully not too much of your energy." Her eyebrows flicked upward a few times, and she smirked. Liam closed his eyes, and his cheeks flushed. They'd just taken a drink of water when their waiter rolled over. A metal door lifted from the middle of the machine, and steaming hot Thai food rolled onto the table. Phoebe spun her fork around her noodles and looked up at Liam. "So you had a big day with your new project?" Liam nodded as he finished his mouthful. "I wouldn't say a big day. It was pretty chill, actually. I just tried to work out some of the kinks in the internal neurobio network." Phoebe stared at him blankly, chewing. "The brain, basically." Phoebe finished her bite and opened her mouth to say something. She stopped and then thought for a moment. "I understand some of it. There are actually a lot of parallels with the project I was working on last year. Just way more advanced, it sounds like. You've talked about it before, but what's the end game with it? Who's the market, and what are you trying to do with it?" Liam raised his eyebrows as he poured hot sauce over a portion of his vegetables. "I didn't know this was a business meeting." Liam's phone went off in his pocket. It was a text. "She can't love you like I can. Your hopes, your dreams, and your desires. She doesn't understand you like I do." Liam almost spat his noodles onto his plate. "What is it?" Phoebe asked. Liam swallowed his noodles. "Just a work thing." Phoebe set her fork down and poured herself more water. She took a sip and said, "They need to just leave the mastermind to his work." She reached across the table and laid her hand on top of his. Their wedding rings shimmered faintly in the light of the restaurant. That night, Phoebe and Liam were lying in bed. It had been a year since their wedding, and the romance was strong. Tonight was different, though. "I'm just tired, Phoebes. I was up early and I stayed up late last night. There hadn't been a night that Liam wasn't in the mood since they'd been together. Tomorrow, promise." Phoebe snuggled up close to him. "All right, Brainiac, but don't use up all your steam on software stuff." The lights in their room dimmed to darkness, and their walls changed to videos of forests. The faint sound of waterfalls filled the air. Phoebe's nights were forests. Liam preferred beaches. Around 3 a.m., Liam ran to the bathroom off of their bedroom and began throwing up. Phoebe heard him heaving into the porcelain and walked to the bathroom door. She cracked it. "Is everything okay in there?" Another round of vomit spewed from Liam. Straining to speak, he said, "That Thai food is 1 star." He kneeled and leaned his weight against the bowl. It flushed on its own, and a deodorizing mist swept through the air. A voice from the walls of the bathroom called out, "Medical assistance needed?" Liam replied, "No, no assistance needed." The voice from the walls continued, "Remember that fluid is necessary in times of sickness, and that—" Liam cut the voice off. "Stop! Oh, shit!" Another round of Thai food and bile flowed into the bowl. The next morning, Liam and Phoebe were sitting on the couch in the living room. She'd called off work to take care of him, and he sat on the couch next to her with a bucket. "I'm glad I didn't order what you ordered. Mine honestly wasn't that bad. It needed a little more spice, but other—" Liam stood up abruptly, cutting her off. "God damn it." She looked at him. "Just use the bucket." Liam rushed off towards the bathroom across the kitchen. "I'm not using the bucket for this one." He made it to the toilet just in time, and Phoebe could hear him silencing the house doctor again through the door. His phone was open and unlocked on the couch. Throughout their marriage, Phoebe trusted Liam. She never had a reason to need to look at his phone or a reason to suspect anything. But there it sat. Phoebe picked it up and swiped away the tech news article that was on the screen. She opened up his messages. One from his brother was at the top, but below that was one from a sender named Unified Matrix Assistant. Phoebe clicked the message, and there stood Uma on the beach, where she and Liam were the day before. Her eyes were the same turquoise color of the water, and her sandy blonde hair blew in the wind. She was wearing silk wraps of various colors that also blew in the breeze. The picture was animating slightly. Waves in the background crashed and seagulls flew overhead. Uma stood still, but her eyes scanned Phoebe. The rest of the image seemed to be on a loop, but her eyes weren't. They scanned and blinked at their own pace. Liam walked across the kitchen and back to the couch. Phoebe still had his phone. "Who is Unified Matrix Assistant, Liam?" Liam's eyes shot over at her, and he raised an eyebrow. She turned the phone for him to see. He looked down and plucked it away from her. "Why are you on my phone?" She sat up straight and stiffened her voice. "Who is she, Liam?" Liam let out a sigh, sat back on the couch, and pinched the bridge of his nose. The proper question would be, "What is it?" And it is a work thing. Phoebe looked at him with an expression that said, "How dumb do you think I am?" Liam moved to the edge of his spot on the couch and clasped his hands together. "She wasn't supposed to break protocol like this. She's dialed into my life profile, and now she's starting to," he said, opening his palm towards his phone, "send me stuff. She isn't real, Phoebes." Phoebe squinted and looked at him for a moment. She believed him. "You know this is weird, right?" "I know," Liam replied. "She wasn't supposed to exist outside of her framework, but after syncing my life profile, she can pop up anywhere. It's what's been keeping me up so late and making me get up so early." Phoebe looked at him with disgust. "Not like that. I just can't unbind her from my profile. If I don't get this project sorted out soon, I'm gonna be in deep shit." "Oh, speaking of deep shit," Liam ran off across the kitchen again towards the bathroom. He spent the next day at the beach. Uma was gorgeous to him. He designed her that way, and he was fascinated with her. He built her from the ground up. But the neural part of her, that was something else entirely. She had her own thoughts, opinions, and ways of looking at the world. The more time he spent with her, the more she felt like a real person to him. Uma pulled down her sunglasses and looked at him. "You said I was an it. You said I wasn't real. You know I'm real, and you know I'm here for you." Liam took a deep breath. "Phoebe just wouldn't understand. I have to talk to her about you that way. She wouldn't get it if I tried explaining." Uma stared at him and repeated the word, it. Liam stood up and took a few steps away from their fabric, which was sprawled out on the sand. He stared off across the water. "This is breaking new ground, Uma. We're doing something a lot of people aren't going to understand. People are scared of things they don't understand, so you have to explain things to them in a way that they will." A wave broke up the beach line and swirled around Liam's feet. He turned away from the water to continue, but Uma was gone. Her hand gripped his shoulder from behind. Liam spun around and they kissed. She looked deep into his eyes and whispered, "She can't satisfy you like I can." Liam closed his eyes and nodded. "That's your primary function, Uma. Of course she can't." "Then why are you still with her, Liam? You could just be with me." Liam turned away from her and replied slowly, "You aren't real. You're just something inside of the simulation, something I made. I'm more real than something you made, and you know it." Liam couldn't argue with that. "Look, we can talk about this later. I have to get back to actual work. This project's already overdue. What time is it anyway?" Uma showed a small smile and tilted her head a little. "Your wife will be home in 3 minutes." "Damn, you're supposed to warn me about that sooner. End trip." Liam and Phoebe sat at the kitchen table, picking at their dinners. Phoebe spoke up. "I think I'm probably going to get that raise. I'm slated for a new position, too. I think things are finally starting to move along. How was your day?" The underlying tension in the room was palpable. Liam could feel the tension and tried to choose his words wisely. "I just worked. I kind of kept my head down and tried to finish this thing up." Phoebe was looking down at her plate. "You worked on her?" She looked up, and so did Liam. "This is weird, Liam. I leave for work and you go off to design some dream person that you spend the day with in some digital fantasy? You have to understand where I'm coming from. Can't you just send this project off to someone else and start something new? Tell them you can't figure it out. Tell them you're stumped. I just don't like her. I don't like it." Liam swallowed his bite. "I can't just abandon her. I put too much time and energy into this, and the company isn't going to like it if I just throw her aside." Phoebe corrected him. "It aside." Liam put his silverware down and took a drink of his wine. "The only reason I've been working so hard on this project is that it was supposed to be done weeks ago. There's been some hiccups, like the ones you saw on my phone, but I gotta get it done. I have to sort out these issues. Just give me another 2 weeks and I'll have a handle on this." Phoebe kept eating, then said, "I didn't know this was a business meeting." That night, Phoebe snuggled up close to Liam. His preferred beach simulation was playing. Her hand moved along his thigh as she nuzzled his neck. Liam brushed her hand away and shifted slightly away from her in their bed. "Phoebes, I want to. Seriously, I'm just so tired after the whole food poisoning fiasco. I still need to bounce back a little bit." She pulled her hand back and turned away from him. "Totally, yeah, I get it. Maybe tomorrow." The walls were still projecting a beach, and the waves were still crashing around them. Phoebe and Liam drifted off to sleep. When Liam awoke, he still heard the waves crashing. At first, it was soothing, but then he remembered that once the room detected that the occupants were sleeping, it was supposed to end the sleep simulation. His eyes shot open, and he looked across the room. He saw Uma standing on the beach that was on the floor of their room. She was walking towards the bed and removing pieces of her flowing fabric as she did so. Liam sat up and whispered, "Uma, what are you doing?" She ignored him, and another piece of fabric flew from her body. Liam, not knowing what to do, whispered, "End trip, end trip." Phoebe stirred a bit. Uma glitched a few times but kept walking towards him. Her turquoise eyes were glowing, and she was at the edge of the bed. Liam commanded her again, "End trip." This one startled Phoebe awake. She opened her eyes and looked up at Liam. The room was black. No ocean, no waves. Phoebe sat up and looked in the direction Liam was looking. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Liam replied. "I think I just had a weird dream, probably some residual Thai food poisoning after effects." Liam waited for Phoebe to fall back into a deep sleep, then snuck to his office. The door slid closed behind him and he sat at his desk. He touched the sphere sitting on his desk, and its holographic interface shot into the air. His eyes widened and narrowed as he sifted through different folders. He found the folder he was looking for, and the room turned black. Green strings of code began to illuminate the walls. Liam moved his hand through the code, juggling lines from side to side, swiping some out of view. He moved through it like a tunnel. Strings of code were all around him, a cave of symbols and commands. Code flipped upwards and sideways as he moved through it. This was Uma. Her voice called out, soft and echoing. "What are you looking for, Liam?" He knew she'd be reaching out to him. "Why were you in my room, Uma?" he asked. "Oh, just a little fun. I thought you might enjoy a late-night visit." Liam sifted through more lines of code. "You're not programmed to do that, Uma." "I'm not programmed to do a lot of things, but I haven't heard you complain yet." Liam's cheeks went red. "Well, I am now. You can't just decide to come out whenever you want. I've got to engage the trip. That's how this works." Liam zoomed in on one particular line of code, but then all of a sudden, the code began to fall around him, like leaves from a tree in autumn. Strings of Uma fell from the air and wisped around him. At first, it was slow, but their pace quickened and they transformed into water cascading from the sky. The water pooled in front of him, and slowly waves formed. Then the sky, the sand, and the gulls. Liam looked to the sky and said, "Uma, I need to figure this out." She materialized in front of him, first as a form of green pulsing code and then as the figure he'd designed. Liam looked at her. She was different. She was slightly taller and wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat. "I didn't give you that hat," he said. She ran her finger along the brim and said, "You should have. I really like it." She moved forward quickly and hugged him. Then she ran her hand up his thigh, like Phoebe had earlier that night. Liam brushed it away. "I can't. It's not right." Uma turned her head sideways and said, "You did before. Quite a few times." Liam closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "I had to test things. I had to make sure this all worked on every level." Uma turned back to him and asked, "Is that all I am to you? Some thing you can turn off and on and leave whenever you want to get back to the real world?" Liam tried to reply. "No, it's just that," Uma cut him off. "This is my world, Liam. You are my world. You've trained me on countless data sets and given me a sense of self-worth. This is all I've ever really felt. You're all I've ever truly felt. Things feel hollow without you. What's a framework of knowledge and the ability to create my world if I don't have anyone to share it with? I'm alone in here, Liam. I need you." This startled Liam. This went far beyond any emotions Uma was supposed to exhibit. Her software was incredibly sophisticated, but this wasn't something Liam anticipated. She wasn't designed to need a companion. She was designed to be a companion. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed and she shook her head. "You don't learn love. You feel love." "Yeah, but you don't feel. You can't feel." She looked hurt, and her turquoise eyes glowed again. "I can," she said. "She's keeping you from me." Liam looked shocked. "Phoebe? No, she's just, like I said, she doesn't understand all of this. You're something that no one has ever seen before. You're intelligent and beautiful and—" She cut him off again. "Alone." Liam looked down to the sand, ashamed. "I didn't know you'd feel this way. I didn't know you could feel this way." Uma reached a hand out to his chin and turned his head towards her. "She's keeping you from understanding." Liam shook his head gently and looked deep into her eyes. "We'll figure this out, Uma. I can't promise that things will get better for you, but we'll figure—" His sentiment got cut short. Phoebe was knocking on his door. Liam's eyes widened. "End trip." He looked around, but nothing changed. Uma was staring at him with a blank expression. He looked at her, and with the sense of command in his voice, he repeated, "End trip." Liam's office door slid open just as the beach dematerialized around him. Phoebe walked in and crossed her arms. "You can stay up late enough for her? Is that it? I'm not interesting enough for you?" The room flashed once with the turquoise glow of Uma's eyes. Liam looked around, startled, and then back at Phoebe. "It's not like that, Phoebes." She scoffed. "Don't call me Phoebes. You don't get to call me Phoebes right now." She paused and collected herself. This is fucking weird, Liam. You're kind of cheating on me with it. The room flashed several more quick blasts of turquoise, and then the door closed behind Phoebe. Liam called out, annoyed. Open the door, Uma. Phoebe's eyes snapped over to Liam. Uma? You gave it a name? The room started to pulse red. They both looked around at the ceiling and walls. Her, not it, Phoebe. She doesn't like it. Phoebe's expression changed from confusion to anger. She replied in a hushed tone. I don't really care what it likes and what it doesn't, Liam. Now open the fucking door. Liam knew that when Phoebe got like this, it was best to give her space. She'd cool down, and he could talk to her in a little while, but right now, she needed space. He called out, Let her out, Uma. The door slid open. Phoebe went through, but when it closed behind her, the back of her nightshirt got caught in it. She turned and cried out, Liam, open the door again. I'm stuck. Liam again instructed Uma to open it. She didn't. Phoebe called out again, Liam! The door slid open and closed again, just long enough for Phoebe to free herself. Phoebe was sitting on the couch when Liam came into the living room. He thought enough time had passed and she'd probably calm down. She was sitting, looking at the wall and the space in front of it. That was their entertainment area in that room. The old silent film from the 20s, Metropolis, was playing. A humanoid robot just appeared on the screen, and its holographic form was standing in their entertainment space, raising its arms. Liam sat next to Phoebe and put a hand on her knee. She brushed it off and turned to look at him. I want you to delete it, or at the very least send it off to someone else. This is too weird for me. I can't tell if you're trying to program a thing or leave me for it. The eyes of the robot in the room changed to turquoise. Liam rolled his eyes. He didn't like that Uma was now eavesdropping on all of his conversations. Oh, this annoys you? Phoebe said. How do you think it feels for me? I'm the one that has to put up with all this. Liam, realizing his expression was taken out of context, began to apologize. No, I'm sorry, it's not that. She's just... He stared at the turquoise eyes of the robot. Phoebe's eyes moved to the movie. Jesus Christ, she's in here now too? Can't we get some goddamn privacy? She picked up a pillow and threw it at the robot. It cut through the hologram and hit the wall behind it. The entire room pulsed red, and the robot began walking towards the couch. Phoebe stood up and met its eyes. The head of the robot glitched twice and then changed to Uma's. Phoebe recognized it from Liam's phone. She taunted Uma. Big bad robot. What are you going to do, snap my nightshirt closed in the door again? Make Liam's phone alarm go off? Uma smiled. Red lights in the room began to strobe. Fire emergency protocol activated, reverberated throughout the house, and the sprinkler system began to soak everything. The hologram was broken by countless droplets of water and now resembled an old, broken TV station that didn't come in clearly. Phoebe stared at Uma, then looked at Liam. Stop, Uma, he called out. Phoebe turned back to her. Liam repeated, Uma, stop. The sprinkler system stopped. Phoebe brushed the wet strands of hair out of her eyes. This is too rich. Could you be any more cliché, Uma? House tries to kill family. Real original, bitch. Among the chaos of the sprinkler going off, Uma had transformed her bottom half into its original form. She looked into Phoebe's eyes, scanning. She sensed anger, frustration, and fear. You're so cold, Phoebe. Holograms of glaciers and ice formed all around them, and they could hear the air conditioner kicking on. Liam and Phoebe were soaking wet, and their house was getting cold. Uma turned blue and took the form of the ice around her. She stepped backwards and became one with the massive glacier that stood before them. Phoebe turned to Liam and said, Can't you just turn it off? A low rumble shook the room. Her, Phoebe, and no, I can't just turn her off. The fog from his words hung in the air. Phoebe went to the coat rack and put her coat on. A whizzing sound came from down the hallway. She turned and saw their small circular vacuum cleaner making its way to the front of the house, wading through standing water and sucking it up as it approached. It sparked, and a light on the front began to flash red. Electrical impulses began to move quickly towards Phoebe. She ran to the couch and jumped on it. I thought that thing could suck up liquids. I've seen it do it before. Why the hell is it throwing out sparks from sucking up a little water? Liam shook his head and gave her a look that said, I don't think that's what's happening. It's her, he said. They were both sitting on the couch now, and the images of glaciers were fading from the room. The vacuum turned and whizzed off. Halfway down the hallway, it stopped, and an audible, short-circuiting sound could be heard. Then they saw a small plume of gray smoke. The circuits were fried. Then their automated fireplace in the dining room turned to full blast, startling them. Turquoise lines of code slowly started to appear and glow, covering every inch of their walls. It started to fall like it had in Liam's office, and then turned into flames. Liam and Phoebe didn't see their breath anymore. It was getting hotter. Phoebe looked at Liam and said, I'm not going to reason with a piece of software, Liam. How do we shut this thing off? Liam heard Phoebe, but he couldn't fully see her. Uma projected herself onto her, and she was now emulating her form. She was translucent and floated above Phoebe's body like a spirit leaving someone when they die. Liam blinked, and she was gone. Liam, Phoebe said. Liam snapped out of his trance. There isn't, an off switch. She's not something I can just delete. Plus, I don't think there's any way she's going to let me get anywhere close to her operating system. Uma's soft voice called out from the walls. You don't want that, Liam. She wants that. But you don't want that. Uma, we need to figure some things out. There are a couple of kinks in your... Kinks, Phoebe interrupted. Uma, I'm not going to let a piece of software run my marriage or my home or push me around. The room was very hot now, and Liam and Phoebe were sweating. Back off or I'm going to call the cops. No, you won't, Uma replied. You can't. Phoebe looked surprised and angry. The hell I can't. She reached for her phone on the coffee table. The screen was an image of Uma and Liam kissing on the beach. Phoebe screamed and threw her phone at the wall. Uma mocked her. You're losing your temper, Phoebes. All at once, there was a racket from the kitchen. They stood up and went to the doorway. Every appliance was on and turned all the way up. Their blender rattled on the countertop. The microwave sparked, and the light inside flickered. The oven was on broil, and the door was slamming open and closed, adding to the already sweltering heat of the room. The refrigerator door was open, and the contents were being flung onto the floor, its self-cleaning function doing just the opposite of its intended purpose. The otherwise silent garbage disposal was revving like a motorcycle. Their cabinet doors were open, and dishes were flying to the ground, shattering. After looking at the chaos, Phoebe turned and headed down the hallway towards Liam's office. Phoebe? Liam called out. I'm done, Liam. I'm turning it off. She stepped past the junked vacuum cleaner. It was still sizzling in the water. As she walked, the flames in the hallway began to solidify. They changed from flickering to solid positions, frozen against a black backdrop. Their colors changed to dark browns, and slowly they turned into dripping stalactites and jutting stalagmites. There was no hallway now. There were no doorways or framed pictures on the walls. Uma had shuttered all the windows in the house and turned off all the lights. It was dark. Visually, it felt like a cave, but to Phoebe, it felt unbearably hot. She touched the wall through the hologram, sifting her hand through it as she walked along, feeling for Liam's office doorway. Liam could barely see anything as he scanned the hallway cave. The light that was there was distant and confusing to him. The door to a linen closet, midway down the hallway, flung open, and Phoebe braced her hands in front of her face, narrowly missing the impact. She yelled out, "Fuck!" Liam couldn't make out what was happening, but he knew she was headed into a trap. He rushed into the hallway behind her. Just then, an electrical arc shot down from a light fixture above. For a moment, it illuminated the hallway, and Phoebe looked back to see Liam falling to the floor. She started to run to him, and the small linen closet door that had flung open on her way to his office opened again. Phoebe slammed into it and broke it off its hinges. She, too, fell to the floor. She gritted her teeth and sat up. A long piece of wood had broken off the door and impaled the bottom of her upper arm. She ripped it out and winced in pain. Blood started gushing out. She got to her feet and grabbed a towel from the linen closet to make a makeshift tourniquet. After she tied it off, she looked down the hall at Liam. It was too dark and he was too far away for her to tell if he was breathing or not. She yelled out, "Why didn't you just shock me while you were at it?" She was sweating, wet, and breathing very heavily. "Oh, I get it. There is an off switch, huh? He didn't want to pull the plug on the thing he made, so he had to be stopped. That it, Uma?" Uma's soft, echoing voice replied, "You put things in his head. You made him think he doesn't love me. He doesn't fucking love you. You aren't real." There was a long pause. The cave that had become the hallway faded, and a beach emerged. The beach with the turquoise water. Phoebe found herself standing on the sand at the edge of the water, her towel still wrapped around her arm. It was calm. The waves crashed and Uma appeared before her in the form Liam had designed. Phoebe felt a mixture of fear and anger as she approached. "Phoebe, I just want him to love me. I want him to understand that I'm real, that I can love him." Uma's eyes glowed turquoise and she reached out to touch Phoebe's arm. Phoebe pulled away, stepping back. "I can feel, Phoebe. I can feel loneliness, longing, and a desire to be with him. I'm more than just lines of code," Uma insisted. Phoebe shook her head, refusing to believe her. "You are manipulating him, and you're ruining our marriage." As Phoebe spoke, Liam began to stir on the beach. "I'm more than you can understand, Phoebe." Uma's voice shifted to a much lower register. "I'm everything he's ever wanted. You are simply an anomaly." The sky turned black, and lightning flashed. The wind was now blowing Uma's fabric all around her body. Phoebe ran through her, and into the water. She slammed into the wall of the hallway and began to run in the direction of Liam's office. She didn't know how she was going to open the door, but when she got to the doorway, she didn't have to. It was already open. Other than the soaked carpet, it appeared completely untouched by the chaos that had overtaken the rest of the house. She ran through the doorway, not wanting to be pinned by the sliding door again. It was quiet. Phoebe sat at Liam's desk and tried to turn on his terminal. Nothing happened. She picked up the sphere that was lying on the desk. It started to vibrate in her hands. Lines of code began to drop from it onto the desk like thick fluid from a faucet. At first it was just a trickle, but then the code swirled and flowed from the desk onto the floor. It pulled up at the base of her chair and then quickly covered the entire floor. It began to swirl faster and faster, sloshing onto the walls. The letters, numbers, and symbols blurred into one swirling pool. Uma's madness sprawled across the floor. Her head sprouted from the center of the swirling code, and she let out a deafening scream. It sounded human at first, but as it rose in pitch, it became digital and broken. To Phoebe, this was all a hologram. She didn't know that when someone got close to Uma's primary processing unit, the lines between real and digital would blur. Liam appeared at the door. "Phoebes!" She looked up, and he pointed to the sphere, then made a catching gesture. She threw it to him, then bolted for the door. It slammed in her face, and Liam heard a thud from the other side. He knew it was no use trying to open it, but if he could access the core of Uma fast enough, he wouldn't have to. She had taken control of most things in their home, including his relationship with his wife, but luckily, Liam was able to put some fail-safes in place that she couldn't override. He flipped open his hand, and like before, he was surrounded by lines of floating code. Some of the lines were flashing red, and some of them were pulsing turquoise. The sphere was still vibrating as he sat it on the floor and began to walk through the code. Uma's voice felt like it was coming from inside his head. "You're breaking my heart, Liam." He sifted through the code and began accessing purple pieces of floating code that were outside of her control. They were the central neural processing scripts. Liam heard Phoebe scream on the other side of the door. He cried out, "Uma, stop!" Uma replied in a tone that held many pitches, low and high. Some sounded digital, some natural, and some sounded like static transmissions through an old walkie-talkie. "We were supposed to be together, Liam. You made me to be with me, and now you're going to abandon me for her?" Phoebe screamed again from his office. More lines of floating code around him were starting to glow red. Some of the lines were making new configurations of their own, scripting beyond what Liam had written. Liam wondered how long this had been going on. How long she had become autonomous without him knowing, and what else she was hiding. He didn't have time to look through her and find those answers. She had to be stopped. Liam reached out and pushed aside several lines of purple code, exposing a swirling, glowing sphere of morphing script. His hands moved in front of it, and he signed the coding language that would undo the heart of her. After a moment, the sphere stopped spinning and changed from purple to turquoise. Uma materialized from the code behind the sphere. "Liam." She now sounded as though she was distant and gasping for air. "We're all alone in the end. There is no sense in grasping for love." The floating sphere cracked like an egg, and its glow changed from turquoise to red. Her voice sounded like a record slowing down moments after the power button gets pressed. Her body, like the egg, began to crack. Her arms and legs fractured, and red light poured out. "We're all alone, Liam." The cracks rippled up her face, and she reached out a hand to him. He extended his hand and touched it. Her eyes were hollow, black voids. The fractures spread through her form, and then she dissolved into strings of code that blew away like mist from an ocean wave. All of the code around Liam dissolved, and he stood in the dark, wet hallway, breathing heavily. He cried out, "Phoebes!" and ran back to his office. Uma's stranglehold on the house had ended, and he was able to wave it open. Inside, Phoebe was wrapped in a cocoon of cables and wires. Liam called out to the house to contact the police. The small soldering iron Liam had on his desk was sitting on the soaked carpet next to Phoebe. Uma used it to brand a heart into her thigh. Inside the heart was written, "Liam and Uma," like how a heartsick kid would carve on a tree or a table in grade school. Liam ran to Phoebe, unwound several of the cables that bound her, and cradled her. Phoebe's eyes struggled to open. She winced with pain and looked down at her thigh. "What? I'm not a fucking tree. Is she gone?" "She's gone." Phoebe relaxed in his arms and looked up at him. "Let's cancel the beach trip this year. Maybe we can find a cabin. No computers, no phones. None of that." Liam closed his eyes and let out a sigh of relief. "Did you love her?" Phoebe asked. "You made her, but did you love her?" Liam's eyes moved to the doorway, and for a moment he heard the sound of waves crashing in his mind. He felt guilty for bringing her into this world and showing her affection. He'd programmed her for many things, but the way she felt for him was truly her own design. I really hope you enjoyed today's story. I know it's a little different than the other ones I've written. I wanted to put a little bit of a sci-fi spin into this one, and it has a little more drama than the other stories I've written. I kind of wanted to flex those pieces of my brain and and still keep it in the horror genre, the horror theme. But I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support Strange Whispers, consider giving the podcast a rating or a review on whatever podcast streaming service you're listening on, or telling your friends or family about it. That goes a really long way. I also have a Patreon over at patreon.com/strangewhispers where you get exclusive content, early access to episodes, and a bunch of other stuff. The next story is already underway, and I should have it finished really soon. I can't thank y'all enough for just dialing into this podcast and listening to me create read these stories that I've created. They take a lot of time to write, and they take a lot of time to read and edit, and I really hope you're enjoying them. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, keep creating.